Guys, I'm gonna see if I can't get Brooke on here real quick. Happy Monday. All right. We got her coming on here soon. Brooke, I just requested you, so see if you see it. If not, go ahead and ask me to join. There it is. Should be coming on here. Hey.
Hi, how are you?
Oh gosh, good. That's always tricky getting on, so
I
I'm
know.
excited that you were able to do that.
Yeah,
I got in my car too. I thought
I
this would be
know.
great.
I was like, we're just gonna talk in our cars. I mean, that's pretty much probably where we have most of our conversations is
Yes.
driving in our
Good,
cars.
good conversations too.
Oh yeah, at
So
least no children in the background screaming,
correct.
so
Busy,
positives.
busy
Yeah.
mamas keep on
Yes.
going, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
So thanks for joining me on the Adoption Connection. I actually started this.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're all connected through adoption, and in Ephesians 1:5 it says we're all connected through the kingdom of heaven by the blood of Jesus Christ. So I'm super pumped to be able to have you on
Yeah.
because you're a longtime friend of mine, and you are also an adoptive mama.
Yes.
And I just want to ask you and start right in. Tell me
Yeah.
about how your journey started.
Um, ironically, since I was like a little girl, I used to talk about adoption. I always just felt like I wanted to adopt a child. I knew I didn't want to adopt necessarily someone that was like Caucasian, just because I had read a lot of literature on the lower rates of
Mhm.
adoption within minorities. And so I just kind of always envisioned having a few adopted kids or some kind of a mixed family. And so, ironically, like I had a friend I went to high school with, and we kind of lost touch for a little while. And her field was Oh, it was kind of in the mental health field. She was going to college, getting her master's degree, and she ended up getting an internship in the state of Florida working with school systems. And part of that was they had a nonprofit that would help the caseloads of foster care families or children that were in the foster care. There was just an overload of kids, not enough caseworkers.
Right.
And so they had started the social system, like started this nonprofit group where internships could come in and actually assist in the foster care cases and kids. And so, how it kind of all got connected is I had a girlfriend I went to high school with, and she had multiple kids as caseloads. And for some reason, my name popped in her head when she had this little baby girl.
Mhm.
And um, she just called me up actually and said, would you be interested? And I was like, well, yes. We had actually struggled with pregnancies, not any kind of specific reasons. It just hadn't happened longer than I was not willing to wait for. And so we had actually looked at adoption agencies prior to her reaching out to me. And so I had gone through both processes. I had gone through the private side. And I think I just never thought about foster care. I thought, well, I know I want to adopt, so let's find an agency. And I, of course, dug in and started doing research. And a lot of what I had read talked about, it's more about finding an agency that you're
Mhm.
comfortable with and then going the route. And so that's kind of where I had set off. And everyone says, when you decide to adopt, that's when you get pregnant, if you're struggling with
Right.
infertility. And I was like, fine, whatever. Yeah.
Bring it
So,
on.
yeah, bring it on. So it's kind of twofold. Like I had taken that route of private adoption, gone through, all the background checks and, getting the home study done. Back in the day before social media, you actually put together like a scrapbook of
Right.
yourself and your family, and then you would give it to the agency, and then that's
Mhm.
how the,
They would
birth
choose
moms,
you and the
yeah,
thing.
would
Yeah.
pick. Yes. So, I mean, that's how long ago it was. And then actually, when we got the call that, a birth mom had chosen us, I had just found out that week that I was pregnant. And so, yes. And my pregnancies are really, really tough. I basically throw up the entire pregnancy. I eventually get put on bed rest.
Oh my gosh.
This was my second pregnancy at this point, and I didn't know that I had this
Mhm.
disorder. I just thought I'm unlucky. But I didn't know how to juggle all of it. I thought there's no way that I can have, my oldest at the time was maybe almost 4.
Oh, wow.
And so I thought, can I be pregnant, laying in bed for 9 months, throwing up,
Yeah.
eating saltines, having a 4-year-old, and then a newborn, that we would have just adopted? And I had a really hard time saying no to that choice of private adoption because it's not a choice, like your
No.
whole heart and soul is invested and you've waited for this moment. But I just thought, I can't think of myself here, like this selfish choice that I want to say yes. I have to think of all the people involved. So
Yeah.
I knew at that point that we would adopt,
Mhm.
but just not right then. And so we said no to the private adoption and, had the baby. And Max was probably 6 months old when my friend Erin called and said she had this child, that was in the foster care system. And she was 6 months. So well, Max was 6 months, so that means Izzy had to have been closer to 9 months. So they're 3 months apart.
Oh, wow.
So
I think
yeah,
Max is
so
watching also right now. I
oh,
saw him come across.
that's fun. Well, he's
Yeah.
supposed to be in school paying
Oh,
attention. So, but I mean, if he wants to listen to
yeah.
this, that's fine too. But we were actually in Disney World when I got the phone call. I specifically remember, we were waiting in line. I had Max in a stroller and Ace was riding rides and she called me and instantly I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
heck yeah. Like, yes, we'll, at least be interested.
Yeah.
And if you've ever adopted through the foster care system, especially if you're a pre-adoptive placement and the child's not in your home, it's a really risky business to get
Yeah.
into. You have to go through judges' orders.
Mhm.
It's still like a very much a qualification process.
Absolutely.
So that was hard to be in the middle of that, knowing that like we were going to put our heart into this process of trying to adopt this child who was in Florida at
Oh,
the time. That's where,
wow.
Izzy was born. And my friend Erin, I went to high school with, she was living in Jacksonville. And so we that probably took almost 6 months to go through that process, and she was in a home, so I would talk to the foster mom,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I remember sending her a Halloween costume. And once we got a little bit further in the process, and it looked like things were going to work
Mhm.
out, we went out to visit her. Um, and then I would sleep with blankets, so it would have my scent on
Yeah.
it, and I
Yeah.
would buy all of her clothes, and I would sleep with it all, and
And
then
how old was
we
she
would send
then?
it to her. So when we got Izzy, she was a little over a year.
Okay.
So from that process of 9 months to a year and a couple months was that like traveling back and forth. I think we were able to visit her one time together, and then the second time was me going out and bringing her back on the plane.
So you were talking about the sleeping with the blanket. I feel like with adoptive
Hmm.
parents, we are super heightened aware of like bonding
Yeah,
because we don't have that opportunity. They weren't in our bodies, they grew in our hearts. And
yeah,
so we want to be like, for me, I didn't have anybody come over to our house for like 2 days. I just wanted him submersed in
yeah,
us.
yeah,
And so for us, it was like that. But for you, it was a little
yeah.
different because she wasn't with you at the time. So,
Yeah, and I don't know if you felt this too, but with Izzy's dad, he was able to kind of connect to her right away.
mhm,
And I just assumed that would happen for me. And I really struggled. I
mhm,
was like, I never realized how much, like, when you're pregnant with that
that you
child,
bond.
you're already
Mhm,
connected. Yeah, and you hear that and you think about that. But to really, like, have her
mhm,
just there all of a sudden. And now I'm like, I'm trying to bond with her. And, she was over 1. So she was not cuddly. She was not
mm-mm,
snuggly. She
mm-mm.
actually didn't want to be held, which
Yep.
has a lot to do with that year of being in the foster
Yes.
care and not wanting, to be soothed. She was
Mhm,
self-soothing. She wanted to be in her crib. She didn't want to
mhm,
be out of her crib. She didn't walk. She didn't talk. She didn't
mhm.
laugh. She didn't eat. Bottles was about it. And she was over a year. So she was 14 pounds. And I was buying
Whoa.
her 3 to 6 month clothes at a
Wow.
year and 2 or 3 months. And then I had Max,
Mhm.
who is 6 months old, and he was this little chubby baby that was like in 1 year
Yeah.
clothes, walking everywhere. I mean, like not quite walking
Yeah.
yet, but by the time we got her, he was turning 1.
Wow.
So he was definitely like on his way into toddlerhood
Yeah.
where she was far behind. So,
Mhm.
we had met with specialists and they said, that's really the number one thing that will push her to catch up because she was
Mhm.
developmentally so far behind is that she'll have this little brother
Yeah.
that she's
That pushes her.
constantly keeping up
Pushes her.
with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes
Yeah.
sense. And
Yeah.
it even happens with biological children. And I had a
Yes.
little bit of a different experience because I was more bonded before he was born because I was with his birth mom so much. So like
Oh,
for me,
okay.
I had a little different experience. So I think that it depends on the child and it depends on the situation.
Hmm.
But I can see 100% why that would be such
Yeah.
a different experience for you because she was older. And that
Yeah.
happens even with like older adoptions in teenage years and things like
Yeah.
that as well. So,
Yep.
and the foster care system is overwhelmed. And I think people
Yeah.
underestimate how
Oh,
important
yeah.
those needs are as well. In my last life, I had a girl on from North Carolina who was equally as invested in the foster care system. So to be able
Yeah.
to be a part of that was is a huge benefit. So thank you for that. That's
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah.
Hmm. So with
Yeah.
you have biological children as well.
Hmm.
You have
Yep.
three boys
Yeah.
and Izzy.
Yeah.
And so you have a mix.
Yep.
Izzy is black and
Yeah.
she is an incredible young woman now. She is how old now?
Izzy's 16.
16. So
Yep.
she has now entered all of the fun phases of life. So tell me
Yeah.
over the course of her like
Yeah.
growing up and everything, what are the successes and challenges that you've seen over the last maybe 10 years?
The success story of Izzy is that when she was born, the
Hmm.
state of Florida has like a 1 to 5 rating.
Hmm.
Um, and she was given failure to thrive, which
Wow.
the other rating lower than that is death, actually.
Right.
And so from the beginning, the doctors, looked at her with all of the things that she was born with, and she was born 3 months premature.
Mm.
And she, as the years have progressed, we've talked to her about what her birth was like to an
Mhm.
extent. There's also only so much that we do know because it's
Right.
foster care.
Hmm.
Um, but she had a lot of challenges ahead of her. She was not born a healthy infant. She had drugs and alcohol and prematurity and didn't have a healthy pregnancy on top of everything. And so, reading her like history as a mom that had just had healthy babies, I was very ignorant into what that was going to look like for her mental health and
Hmm.
physical health. I'm thankful for that. I tell people, if you're completely educated on how hard any child is, I think all of us would be like,
Exactly.
wait a second, well, maybe I want to do a few more things, or
Yes.
have a little bit more me time. But getting kind of thrown into that world of a child who has a lot of obstacles in their way that like really healthy babies don't have. A
Hmm.
lot of times she would struggle with things that my boys would not even struggle with,
Right.
and her how far she's come in 10 years has been really
Hmm.
huge. There's a lot of things that unfortunately for her are going to continue to be a lifelong struggle. And so it's more or less
Sure.
about learning what that looks like
Yeah.
and stopping yourself just because of a pattern of behavior, not because you really understand why you shouldn't do things or should do things. It's more or less like, I recognize this. I know
Hmm.
what's going to happen if I choose to go down that path. So I'm going to
Hmm.
stop, where with my boys who have, had full pregnancies and
Hmm.
healthy births, they don't have to struggle with those things. So her obstacles of what she overcomes, in a 10-year looking back period is huge. When she didn't eat food. So
Right.
teaching her
To
to
do.
sit and eat
Yeah.
food, and then what you don't realize is for a child that hasn't had food their first year of life, even still to this day, it's a trigger for her. She wants to constantly have control over her food intake.
Hmm.
At my house, there's fruit sitting on the
Hmm.
counter. She can have any healthy food choice
Yeah.
at any time, but yet you can still see her having that like worry of what are we going to eat tonight. She's the first one to ask me what's for
Yeah.
dinner, and she'll eat sometimes more than her brothers.
Hmm.
So that for her is something that she'll always worry about, always struggle with. And so to,
Okay.
have her overcome just some of those things that you wouldn't think about. But, overall, I would say she's a very resilient
Hmm.
child. One stat that I had learned after we adopted her was that the highest rate of babies who have like a failure to thrive is female African Americans. So
Wow.
she's very strong
Hmm.
personality. She's stubborn. She's a fighter.
She
So
is.
that, yeah,
She's
that
gone on to be
serves.
an athlete. She's been a
Yeah,
cheerleader. She's
yeah,
like that girl
yeah,
is ripped up. She's got a and to see that
yeah,
that progression for her has been amazing.
yeah.
So
Yeah, and things that like are like a great success for her would be that she's able to like engage in a team activity and successfully like have a
hmm.
season. Like, conflict is hard for her.
Hmm.
controlling herself in a social atmosphere is hard for her. And
Mhm.
as a teenager, you already have those worries
Yep.
and you're trying to fit in already. And then compound that with really, she's not as aware of her surroundings as maybe others are, or
True.
understanding social awkwardness is not
Mhm.
necessarily there for her. And
Mhm.
so, like, how do you teach that to a teenager
Mhm.
without making them feel
Yeah.
insecure or making them feel, stupid or dumb, or, you just try really hard to nurture that side.
Yeah. And I feel like as moms, we kind of, I don't want to say beat ourselves up, biologically and adoptive moms. We
Yeah.
just want to be the best parent we
Yeah.
can for the kiddos. And different challenges with different kids. I mean,
Yeah.
I laugh because my oldest is kamikaze and he does all these crazy things. And he's my adopted one. My middle child, the type A rule follower. My other biological child is the blend of the two. So I mean, you're gonna
Hmm.
get so many different realms of
Yeah.
personalities and obstacles they will always have to overcome, whether they're adopted or not. But when you
Yeah.
have the situations that are some of our kiddos are presented with, if you adopt an out of foster care, you may have somebody that has been exposed to drugs or been exposed to things like that. So those are conflicts that you have to watch throughout the course of their
Hmm.
entire life. And as a
Yeah.
mom, you just beat yourself up like, I wish I could protect him. I wish I could,
Hmm.
you almost feel more sense of necessity for that as the adoptive parent.
Oh, yeah.
Because your biological children, I'm like, I'm sorry, you got that from me. But for the
Yeah.
kiddos that are adopted,
Yeah.
we're just like, oh my gosh, I wish I could just take that from
Yeah.
them. So
Yeah. I will say, like, one thing that I think people constantly, ask me about is that nurture versus nature. And I was that mom that came into this thinking, I will love this out of them. I will discipline this out of them. Like, I will do whatever I
hmm
need to do, to teach them and show them.
yes,
And that's been a huge eye opener for me, that there is things that innately are within her that
hmm
I can't take from her. I can't out teach her
hmm
certain things. And that is hard. That is
yes,
really hard to see, her in certain circumstances
hmm
struggle, but then in other circumstances, the wins for her are huge wins,
big wins.
Yeah.
It's awesome to see. So I
Yeah.
know as a white parent with a
Yeah.
black child, there's always the struggles of the
Oh
hair.
my gosh.
And I'm a hairstylist, so I think that
Yeah.
when we first start going into adoption and stuff, they talk about if you are going to adopt interracial, with a
Hmm.
biracial child or a child that is of a different race, you're going to have these situations of the hair
Hmm.
where you're going to be lost or whatever.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I know quite a bit about hair because I'm in the
Yeah.
industry, but I've seen many mamas come in just sobbing because they don't like know.
Yeah.
And I know that there's a charity in
Yeah.
Chicago that actually supports this. It's a
Oh
black
man.
owned business and they have
Yeah.
the white parents bring in their adopted black children and it's just awesome to see. But that's a challenge. Did you
Yeah.
find that struggle with Izzy?
Oh, yeah. Well, and again, so she's 16. So 16 years ago, we didn't have like all the connections on Facebook and the groups and the things that you could outreach for.
Mm-hmm.
I actually like didn't know a lot of Black people. So it wasn't like I could reach out to
Mm-hmm.
someone that like I knew. And I remember opening the phone book because that's what we had again back in the
Right.
day. And I I opened the phone book and I literally was looking for, this is going to maybe sound bad in certain circumstances, but looking for the most Black name of a salon.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just was trying to find something that would connect with,
Yes.
her being African American. It was like, I knew I couldn't take her to like creative. It was like,
Yeah.
I was looking for like, I mean, her hairstylist name is Quita. I was
Mm-hmm.
looking for
Mm-hmm.
something that would like just connect with her so that I could, try to find something. I mean, I was
Yeah.
desperate. You just couldn't.
Yeah.
And so I actually just started making phone calls. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I'd call somebody and I would say, she's 2. Do you
Yeah.
do a 2-year-old's hair? And the woman would be like, no, her mother and her grandma does her braids. Or, yeah. And I was like, well, this mother and
Is
definitely not
not
the
gonna.
grandma is not going to be doing her braids. Or, she had little puffs forever. And I didn't realize, like, with her kind of a kinky curl, that, like, if she slept on a cotton pillowcase, that actually was
Yeah.
rubbing off her hair. So
Mm-hmm.
she had spots all over where it just wasn't growing. And I had no idea what was happening. I had no idea that, like, and it was hard because you would talk to certain people
Mm-hmm.
who would
Yes.
say, oh, you have to put heat on her hair. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you can't just comb through her hair.
Mm-hmm.
You need to put heat on her hair. Then other people are like, you do not put heat on that girl's hair.
Yes.
So I'm just sitting here with like this 2-year-old, 3-year-old, whose hair, is this long. And then when you
Right.
straighten it, it maybe is this long.
Yeah.
So I remember just using Vaseline on her skin because someone had said that's what they use for
Yep.
lotion because you don't want to be ashy. Well, then
Absolutely.
everything she touched had a grease mark all
Right.
over it. So that was not working. And so, I mean, I just struggled across the board with
Yeah.
everything. And, one thing I did learn through time was that in the African American community, like their hair is part of the culture. Like it
Absolutely.
is about
Yep.
your attitude comes out in your
Yep.
hair. It could be like anything that you want to show is in your hair. And it's important. You spend hours on your hair, you
Very.
get your braids right, like you get them redone. Um, and so that's part of what I've tried to teach her as well. And along the road, I've been able to expose her to more African American women that are like her that she can look up to, and they can have come in and swooped in and helped, have that
Yes.
conversation with her about
Right.
what the hygiene should look
Yes.
at and the things that she should be thinking about because, I'm
Important.
over here. Yeah, it's just not something I've thought about. I get annoyed if I have to spend 20 minutes on my
Yeah.
hair, and then she's getting her braids done 6 hours
For 8 hours.
later.
Yes.
I'm bringing her snacks and coloring books, and I'm sitting in the salon with her. And so,
Yeah. And I
yeah,
think even with my son, he's known for his hair. And I think the thing about it has been it's been a lifelong thing. And so, I'm a hairstylist, but that doesn't mean my kids trust me with their hair, even though I know I can do it. It's like, yeah,
right.
mom, what do you know about? I was like, well,
Yeah.
I can do that. So I braided his hair a couple of times, and he's actually a light enough skinned kid that he
Mm,
doesn't really fit into the black community, doesn't really fit into the white community. So he gets a lot of comments in the school systems.
hmm.
One of them said, "What's your white mama doing your black hair for?" Because I was doing braids on him, and that was a really like I felt terrible for him to have to
Yeah.
go through that. And I think
Yeah.
ultimately we just wanted to, have them experience a lifelong amazing.
Yeah.
Max says he's back. Hi,
I
Juliana. There's
see
the poop
his
on him.
now.
So I think it's ultimately been a struggle. I think
Yeah.
most parents do struggle with that, but
Hmm.
that's just one of the hurdles with the adopted kiddos. Now, for goal setting and things like that for her,
Yeah.
do you guys talk to her on a regular basis about her history, or do you feel like it's actually sets her back if you converse too much about adoption?
When she was little, I always had a lot of books, that talked about adoption, and we would
Yeah.
read them. So I've tried to make it to where she can ask whatever questions. I think the hardest part for us is that we don't have a lot of answers. We're not
Right.
connected to the birth family. I've never tried to seek out and find the birth family. We've talked to her if she ever gets to that point when she's a little bit older to find the birth family. Of course, my worry is that I think it's easy for kids to fantasize, right? Like, I'm going to find
Yeah.
my birth mom and she's probably amazing and she's awesome. I'm going to have this whole other really welcoming family. And the tidbits that we do know about what her birth looked like, I just don't know that it would be a positive for her to maybe learn
Yeah.
some of that
Yeah.
history. Um, and that makes me sad for her,
Right.
that some of the kids can go and be adopted and find their parents and reconnect their
Yep.
birth parents. And it's an amazing experience.
Yeah.
And I just don't know that that's going to be her experience. And so it does limit like what we talk about necessarily. I will say that that's probably as a parent something I feel the most guilt about is that I don't do more of like her heritage. I don't know if it's just the community that we're in. I live kind of under a rock. We work a lot. I have a lot of activities with the kids. So I just don't stop to think about, oh, there's something happening within the community that I could take Izzy to,
Yeah.
and she could be exposed to
Yes.
this. I mean, it it's small things like last weekend we went and played frisbee golf at Iowa Western Community College, which is in Council Bluffs, and a lot of the students integrate from other areas to Iowa Western, and so you can drive through that community and their campus, and there's a lot of African
Diverse.
Americans. So
Yeah.
as we're driving, yeah, through this, she kind of points it out. She's like, "Wow, huh, there's a lot of
Hmm.
black people here." And I'm like, well, yeah, they're from all over, Izzy. Like, you have a lot of people that come, and play football here. They have
Yeah.
a really great athletics program. And so you just don't think about it until you're in certain situations. And then I'm like, well, gosh, what am I exposing her to? Because we have a really large family here in Council Bluffs, and she's the only adopted out of 35 cousins, and she's the only African American. And I do feel for her that I'm sure she would love to have some connection outside of, with someone of her race
Yeah.
outside of us. And so,
I think it's
having,
important for sure, but
yeah,
it's hard if we are busy people.
yeah,
Recently, we've had the opportunity to connect Seth with, um, you know, if a doctor could be,
yeah,
he might talk to somebody a little bit easier. He's actually requested uh, somebody of color to be able to be a doctor. So,
huh,
those things, if they can get vocal about what they need and stuff, that can help us. But it is important, I think, for us to recognize that they are culturally
yeah,
different for the
yeah,
needs. Even though we don't treat them any different, we don't see them any
no,
different, but they are
yeah,
in their minds still the only one. And
yeah,
so it's important for us to kind of
yeah.
celebrate that.
Well, and I think she's talked to me a little bit about when, she has new friends and, she'll show them a picture of her mom. And they're like, that's your mom? And I think they just, you meet someone who's black, you assume their family is black. And I'm sure her brothers feel the same way,
Yeah.
right? And if friends are running into her, they don't know the background, they don't know her story. And then you're like, yeah, this is my brother. Well, I mean, I remember when Max and Izzy, who are my two that were 3 months apart or are 3 months apart, I'd push them in those double strollers,
Oh
as
yeah.
toddlers.
Oh
And
yes.
people would always be like, oh, thinking there's going to be twins or something in there. And they would like be like, oh, and then they'd like turn their head and it would be like this really chubby white baby. And then it's like this very skinny black baby.
Uh-huh.
I mean, they couldn't have been more opposite. And
Oh
then people would be like, oh, oh, that's all they just didn't know what to say, And so,
yeah.
you just kind of try to learn to like roll with it
Yeah. And
but
celebrate
yeah,
it.
I wish I did a better job of probably exposing her to more of her culture or paying
Well, we can
attention
all do
to,
better. So you can't
events.
want to beat yourself up, but I definitely think it's all of us could do better with that.
Yeah.
And I think that's important for adoptive families to do that. So
Yeah.
we can maybe
Yeah.
make maybe a November pact to be able to
Yeah.
do this. But
Yeah.
I do think with kiddos, especially in the teenage years, they come up with a lot of things at school, whether it's bullying and things like
Yeah.
that. Do you find that she's had some people with her adoption saying things to her in the past that maybe were mean or harmful?
Yeah, I mean, so Izzy started last year at a high school
Hmm.
that was a lot more interracial than probably what she
Good.
had been used to. Um, and I think it will be, I think it is good for her. It's a
Hmm.
struggle though,
Hmm.
because I think at that point, then she really realized, like, I don't fit in with these black girls. Like, I don't, understand how they're talking. And I saw a change in maybe her lingo and the way
Hmm.
she talked. And, um, of course, as a mom, it's like, it's hard to see your kid kind of talk ghetto, which
Hmm.
is totally the only way of like I know of saying it. You're using slang words towards your
Hmm.
brothers or the way you're speaking, and you don't want it to be disrespectful,
Hmm.
and so you're talking to them about it. But then I understand that, like, she's probably doing it because she's thinking I need to talk like that because all of these other black kids at school talk like that,
Hmm.
and so it's that divide that you don't really think of, that you're trying to, I guess, navigate for them. But yeah, I think she's probably a lot like your son right now. She's 10th grade and just wanting to fit in, and you know, she wants to fit in with the black kids, and I think she feels like she's not black enough
Yeah.
sometimes. And then,
Hmm.
the white kids, she doesn't really fit in with them
Hmm.
either. That, they might not understand some of the struggles, or they go get their hair
Hmm.
done for homecoming and she's already got her braids in. It's like,
Yeah.
well, you can put it in a bun, you can
Yeah.
pull it up, but
There's
your
something
hair's
to it.
already done. Yeah. So, and again, the hair has really given her a lot of confidence. She likes to pick a
Hmm.
color out, or,
Hmm.
she looks up styles, and I
Hmm.
think that makes her feel
That's
really
great.
good about herself, and I think the other African American girls at school will compliment her on
Hmm.
it, or they talk a little bit more. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I mean,
Good.
definitely, yeah, definitely being exposed to more of a mix has, I think, been good for her.
I like that a lot. I
Yeah.
think we're definitely the type of people that, an adoptive world, when we're adoptive parents, you tend to adopt everyone around you as
Mhm.
well. And I think we just want to take everyone under our wing and make sure that
Yeah.
everybody
Yeah.
feels okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's hard to see kids
Yeah.
struggle. It's really hard. But
Yeah.
then at the same time, we're parents along the way, so we have to continue to guide and direct them as we feel that they're safe. So, But yeah, so we've got, November's coming up. It's Adoption Awareness Month. We're super excited about that.
Yeah.
And November 9th is the World Adoption Day. So I'm actually asking all of my followers and people that are on here that they would wear white on a day, especially November 9th, and take a picture and post it and tag us and just say, National Adoption Awareness Day. We are supporting the adoption
Yeah.
community. And we just want to keep everyone in a great space with that and very aware of
Yeah.
what's happening. We are all touched by adoption, whether we know it or not. We have had many times where I've come across people that are adopted and you just didn't
Yeah.
know it. So we want to make sure that we're inclusive in offering so many things to them,
Yeah.
any adoptive families, the adoption awareness stuff. So we want to make sure that everybody's included in that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we celebrate you as an adoptive mama and Izzy as a rock star woman
Yeah.
coming into her womanhood.
Mm-hmm.
So we're really
Yeah.
excited to be able to do that next month. So again, November 9th is adoption awareness. And do you have any final thoughts today before we jump off this call?
No, I mean, I think one thing that adoption brings to people that are definitely like close to immediate, adoption, but I've always talked about how, having Izzy has definitely like kept us with a
Mhm,
soft heart. Seeing her struggle with some of the things that I would
mhm,
not even think kids struggle
mhm,
with, has definitely like impacted me to have a soft heart towards some of these adopted kids and just the things that they go through. So we take for granted all the health and mental health and physical health when we have healthy babies, and you just go along your day and forget about it. But she really struggles across the board pretty much throughout the day. And so it's made me definitely have a softer heart towards some of the kids that you wouldn't realize, are struggling. So anytime I see a kid have an attitude or a problem, the old me would probably be like, well, their parent needs to get them in check. But, as we've gone through life with Izzy and seeing how hard she's working, and it's,
mhm.
soft
She
heart.
does work hard.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, those kiddos, like ultimately, we want to be accepted as humans and we want to be included as humans.
Yeah.
And I think you're doing a great job, and all of us will struggle, but we all want to be a community together. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining me
Yeah.
today. I hope everyone got a great
Yeah.
experience today. And be sure to leave us a comment if
Yeah.
you haven't already. And Brooke, you're the best. I love you,
Yeah.
girl.
Thank you.
Good to have you on here.
Back at ya.
And we'll see you soon, all
Okay.
right?
Sounds
Take
great.
care.
Thanks, son. Okay. Bye.
Bye.